Hello everyone, my name is James Pyle. I'm a adjunct in the English division and one of the adjunct representatives on the executive board for the United Faculty. I'm posting a series of short videos going over the process to apply for unemployment benefits in the state of Washington. If you're an adjunct, you should be taking advantage of this, even if you typically work a full load every quarter. You're still eligible to receive unemployment benefits anytime you're not under a contract, which would be any time that classes are not being offered. So it's something you should absolutely be doing. This is being recorded in March of 2020 during the coronavirus epidemic that's going across the world at this point, but is especially affecting us in Western Washington. So that's when this is current. The information doesn't really change too much. There may be slightly different things happening at this moment because of the pandemic, but generally the process is pretty much the same no matter when you're applying for unemployment. So normally when I give this presentation in person, it takes about an hour, maybe a little bit longer. I'm going to break this up into 4 different sections, essentially. This first one is kind of before you apply. The second one is doing the initial application. The third one is during your first week that you're on unemployment, and then one that covers subsequent weeks and reopening your claim. So I'm trying to make it a little more digestible so you don't have to listen to me for an hour straight. I'll do my best to be succinct and answer any questions that generally come up when I do this. One final note before we get going, though. I'm not a lawyer. I don't take this as legal counsel. This is really just based on my own experiences applying for unemployment and going through the process many years in a row. So if you do have questions, or you have to have a hearing with ESD, you might consider contacting legal counsel, because I'm definitely not a lawyer. But if you do have additional questions after you've watched these, you can always reach out to me. Again, my name is James Pyle, P-Y-L-E. So my email address is just jpyle@greenriver.edu. So, okay, this first video, as I said, we're really going to go over sort of what you have to do before you file, and some sort of groundwork you want to make sure you do so that things are in order when you go to file your first claim. Okay, so the first thing you really want to do, it's required really, is set up a login through Secure Access Washington. It's essentially a website that the state of Washington set up a few years ago to that allows you to validate that you're a citizen of the state of Washington, and then you get access to various. You can use it to access various state level agencies. One of those being the Employment Security Department, ESD, which is the department that manages unemployment claims. So the website's there at the bottom of this slide. I'll just go ahead and open it so you can take a look at it. It's really straightforward. Basically, it just validates that, like I said, that you live in Washington. So you can see, you just go to the website here, and then you click on the sign up link right here, and it'll walk you through the process. It's not super difficult. It only takes a few minutes, and once you're done, if you have a Washington State ID, it's really straightforward. It's not really difficult at all. So that's the main thing, and you can really do that at any point. It doesn't have to be after you're out of a contract. You can, like I said, you can do it anytime. So I would suggest doing it, whenever you're done watching this. just to get it out of the way. But you do want to make sure that you save the information that you use to set up the username and the password, because those will actually be what you use when you access the unemployment website. You'll use that same SAW information. So that's the first thing. The second thing you have to do is a little more complex, but it allows you to get a sense of what your claim's going to be like, and gives you some information in case you have to do some sort of legwork when you're filling out your initial application. So ESD uses a bunch of different terms. One that you got to become familiar with is base year, and it's what the ESD will use to determine how much your weekly benefit is, or it's one of the things. So the first thing you should probably do is figure out what your base year is. Now, as I said, I'm recording this in March of 2020, so I've provided the breakdown as it would be for this time period. So if you're watching this video later, at some point later on, you just kind of have to adjust the quarters back a little bit to get it to fit correctly with when you're initially filing. But basically, ESD uses regular calendar quarters, so 3-month time periods, to establish your base year, not quarters as we use them in the academic world. It's important to keep that in mind. Though the quarters do generally correspond to the academic year, it's not exactly the same. So keep that in mind. And the quarters are basically January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, and October, November, December. So the way the base year works is ESD is going to look at what you got paid during the first 4 quarters of the last 5 completed regular calendar quarters. So it's sort of convoluted the way they say that. But basically, as I said, if you're applying for this for your first time in March of 2020, this would be the last 5 completed quarters, because you're still in a quarter in March. You haven't completed that. So the last completed quarter would be this one here, October through December of 2019. That would be the last standard calendar quarter. But ESD is going to look at the first 4 of the last 5. So what they're actually going to look at is these quarters here, quarters 1 through 4, October of 2018 through September of 2019. And they're going to use the earnings from this time period to determine what your weekly benefit is when you're collecting unemployment. So I know it's sort of convoluted. I couldn't say why they decided to do it this way. That's just the way they did it. But essentially, it is a full calendar year, as you can see, basically, a 12-month period that they'll use to determine your base year. So in this case, your base year would be October 2018 through September 2019. And the reason that's important is because you want to, when you're doing your application, and we'll talk about this in the next video, you want to, as best you can, go back and verify that the earnings that have been reported to ESD are correct for your base year, because if they're underreported, that means you're going to get less every week on unemployment. So you want to be able to know what the time frame is that they're looking at and validate that the amount of money that you made during that time is what's adequate, or it's what's accurately being represented in their system, because sometimes it's not. So it's just important to know that. Okay, so that's the first step. Well, really, that's the second step. The first step is creating your SAW account. And then the next thing you want to do before you start filing is to just validate that you actually worked enough hours in your base year to actually qualify for an unemployment benefit, because there is a minimum hours that you had to have worked in order to be able to get a unemployment insurance. So generally speaking, if you teach 10 credits, I know that's kind of, transfer side heavy, but if you teach 10 credits in 3 quarters, you're pretty much guaranteed to qualify. But again, you want to do this math yourself just to make sure you're safe. And it requires some amount of calculation to take the number of teaching hours that you've done and translate those into what ESD considers to be work hours. So the Employment Security Department makes a base assumption. It's not really a great one, but it's what we're working with here. But they make a base assumption that a full-time instructor at a college works 35 hours per week, right? So not the number of contact hours, right? They know that a lot of our work happens outside the classroom. So even though a full load at Green River is 15 credits per quarter, they consider those 15 credits to be equivalent to 35 hours per week. Again, I know that's probably under selling it. Those of us that do teach 15 credits in a quarter know that we probably work more than 35 hours a week, but that's the assumption that ESD is working on. So the way you calculate this is essentially you take the base for a full-time faculty member at your institution and then essentially multiply it by whatever percent you're doing. So as an example, at GRC, right, an adjunct teaching 10 academic hours per week, or someone who's carrying 10 credits in a quarter, is working 2/3 of a full-time load, because our faculty contract stipulates that a full-time load is 15 academic hours. If you're teaching at multiple schools, this could be different. Faculty unions, they negotiate different full-time load structures. So if you're teaching in multiple schools, you want to take a look at the faculty contract at each school so that you're accurately accounting for this. But at Green River, it's 15 credits. So if you're teaching 10 credits, you're getting 2/3 of a full-time load, right? So you take that 2/3, you multiply that per percent or that fraction by the full-time load regular hours of 35, right? Because remember, we're looking at regular hours, not contact hours. So 2/3 times 35 gives you 23 regular work hours per week if you're teaching 10 credits, right? Now you multiply that by the number of weeks. So for instance, in the fall of 2019, we had 12 weeks. So this gave us 276. This would have given us 276 hours in this hypothetical situation. So you can see 276 hours, that's a pretty big chunk of hours in a 3-month period, particularly when the minimum to be eligible is to have worked 680 hours in your base year. Okay, so you got to go back again, look at those 4 quarters, look at what your teaching load was in that base year time period, and calculate out based on what your teaching load was, how many total hours you worked during that base year. So as I said, if you're teaching a minimum of 10 credits per quarter, and you do that in 3 quarters, you can see that you get over that 680 hour mark. So, a good rule of thumb is if you're qualifying for benefits, generally speaking, you're probably qualified to collect unemployment. But keep in mind that benefits are calculated over a 2-year rolling average. So you can still qualify for benefits even if you have a year that's really low, where you're only working, a smaller load. That could impact whether or not you meet that 680 regular hour minimum. So again, it's just a rule of thumb. If you're qualifying for benefits and you teach pretty stably the same amount of classes every quarter, then you're probably going to qualify for unemployment. And also keep in mind that your summer hours count as well, right? So you have to calculate in your summer hours if you teach during the summer quarter as well. Okay, so that's kind of the stuff you want to do up front, sort of beforehand, just so you have that information available. Like I said, I'm trying to keep these videos kind of short, so that's where we're going to stop for this one. So sort of just quick recap. make sure you go to the Secure Access Washington site and create a login and password. Validate you're a Washington State citizen. Keep that login information. Calculate your base year. Calculate your regular work hours in that base year, and then you'll be ready to sit down and go through the process of applying for unemployment the first time. And that's what we'll cover in the next video. So I will see you there.